Robert Thibodeau, MayflowerBookshop.com, back with you on the third part of this astrology voyage. We're going into the astrology of September, October, December on, talking about a few different things. Mainly, we talked about Saturn square Uranus and how Jupiter's influence in early Aquarius earlier, when Jupiter and Saturn conjuncted last December, giving this indication of, is it possible to have a new age? And spirituality and truth and compassion can kind of help guide us to helping everybody to be co-creative and happy. Is it possible? Is it possible to awaken this ability to creatively adapt and metamorphosize, grow oneself into every situation and have a better result than we've been having? Is that possible? And can we find happy, fortunate, not just release from tension, but creative? We're using the difficulties of ourselves and the world around us to kind of shoot us past Saturn into like a better astrological presentiment. Is that a word? We might have to make up some new words. The times are tough. But the goal is to make good on whatever aspects take place and to be true to ourselves and our higher self, and to make things more beautiful for everyone. These sudden turns of destiny and fate have been hitting the world pretty hard with storms and fire. It's like the misfortune of getting into difficulties, but we're looking for the fortune to get out of difficulties and to turn lemons into lemonade, right? To turn everything into the garden of friendship and family and creativity and peace of mind and joy. So, we're looking at, when you look at the United States chart, which I'm not going to get into now, but we might in the next astrological voyage here. When we look at the United States chart, we're looking at Neptune. We're looking at Neptune at the bottom of the chart opposing the midheaven. And there's other aspects involved too, but you can think of Neptune. I use the Sagittarius rising chart for the United States, although all the charts can work in different ways. But I really like the aspects that I found on major events, whether it's 9/11 with Pluto on the ascending sign, or whether it's the Civil War or the stock market drop. There's always something there to find that can reflect. In some ways, the astrology chart is the mirror of what we're inwardly and outwardly doing in the past and in the present, that creates world situations in the now that will correct our future. That karma, the lords of karma, like when you say karma, cause and effect due to some past thing. Karma's here to correct things so that they get better. And dharma is how to, in thinking, feeling, and will, how to spiritually, in our thinking and feeling and our actions, align ourselves for a more holy future, happiness that might last. Okay, so we're looking at the astrology chart and of the United States, and we have like, you think of like the ascending sign is east, and the descendant west, and we definitely have a situation where there's Neptune at the bottom, which could have been related to the floodings, Neptune opposing the midheaven. Neptune, it can have something to do with the floodings down south and the storms down there. And we're talking, when we look at the United States chart, we're talking about Neptune bottoming out, opposing the midheaven in Virgo with Neptune up there. Neptune opposed Neptune, whoa. That is a tricky thing, and that's where I'm saying that if you look to the south, if you look at the United States chart, you can see it as a directional device. One of the many ways I predict things with astrology, and for clients and for public. and you look at the Neptune opposing Neptune, there's a lot of delusion and unsurety, and some people are over-inspired that they know exactly what to do and it's all going to be good, and other people are completely freaked out and have false imaginations that terrify them. Fear will freeze you. Fear will freeze you. Love will move you. Desire can burn you, but it can move you too. And when you have that Neptune at the bottom of the United States chart opposing midheaven Neptune, which can be water or floods or weird volcanic, maybe. But mostly it's like water. Neptune's considered the king of the oceans, the sea and water. But Neptune's also squaring Mars in Gemini in the 7th house, which is west, and those are the fires. Mars is anger and fire and too much desire. And the positive side of Mars is Michaelic courage for intelligence, higher intelligence to lead us beyond our acting out of separate self. Acting out of separate self is the ancient India Hindu origin of sin, or causing suffering that doesn't bring healing or enlightenment. And I'm thinking that when we go into the end of this year, into next year, 2022, we have Jupiter coming to trine the United States Venus, and eventually Sun too. And so I think we're going to be pretty darn happy next year. And when Venus trines the United States, Venus, Jupiter too, but Jupiter's going to come and do this. It's going to be kind of cool. And I think the thing I wanted to share with you is that I think that using this United States chart that I'm using, the Jupiter conjunct the United States moon earlier in the year, the moon in Aquarius, is definitely this money throw, that all these people are making money and getting money, and the government's trying to help people, and the stock markets have been going up. And I think that October is a very serious time where is President Biden going to announce that he's not going to run next time? I mean, if I had his aspects, I would. If I was his advisor, they should hire me, I think, but maybe not. I'm just trying to see what the higher and lower octaves are that we could try to position ourselves. And, the United States, as you go into October and then even November, President Biden has some tough aspects, and so is there health issues or political issues or something that makes the mass of public be upset with him or something, and I'm just wondering out loud. And we don't have time to really go into all the aspects. It would be a whole giant talk of any point I'm making. I'm just trying to give you creative ideas so you can research on your own. Because the United States is coming back to a Pluto return. And that return of Pluto return is the collective karma. It's in the 2nd house. Collective karma of money and power trips. And, the United States as the breadbasket of the world, as the melting pot of the races, they used to say, or something like that. Steiner said something like it's the graveyard of the races, and a new American citizen is going to arise on a planetary level, universal love, truth level, compassion level. And that might take a little time, but it's coming. And we look at the end of November into December, when Uranus retrograde opposes the United States moon Pluto. Is that part of I'm wondering if October, November, the stock market might take a heavy correction and take a dive, because what else would force people to really change their ways or change their direction? Then it seems like money seems to control a lot of people and influence a lot of people. And so when the money's on the rise or the money's on the fall, if you print too much money, the money's not worth anything. If everybody's printing money and getting extra money, then all of a sudden people are paying more for stuff. And they're looking for this inflation took place because they're printing money. And then too much money, maybe. I don't know. I'm just wondering, is that how it happened? And then all of a sudden everything's worth more because there's too much money going around. Everybody's paying more for things and houses, and then the COVID problem, which I thought would start to get resolved, and maybe it is in some places, and maybe it's not, but certainly, is it going to finally reach its conclusion here in October, November, and then as we go into the end of the year and next year, you would think with Jupiter trining Venus, when everybody thought in the spring that everything was going to get better with the COVID, that was when Jupiter didn't go retrograde. Jupiter was going forward, and it was coming closer to that, approaching that trine to the United States, Sun and Venus first. And so that's going to happen next year, and maybe we'll get on top of this whole situation. And right now, everybody's grinding the lens for clearer seeing. Like you have this lens for your glasses or your magnifying glass or your telescope so you can see better. And mostly we're all into the grind of trying to grind a clear seeing, a way of seeing, and grind ourselves into a more perfect gemstone of beauty and clarity and happiness. Is that what's going on? And so let's look at this. Let's look at these new and full moons. October full moon, strangely enough, has ex-President Trump has a lot of good aspects. President Biden has a lot of tough aspects. It's going to be a wild time, where we don't know what's true or not. And that's why it's imperative, spiritually speaking, that each one of us has 3 to 5 minutes. You can check out my meditation, How to Save the World in 3 Minutes a Day, that each one of us has some kind of radical stillness where we dissolve and digest our experience and what's going on, and that we radically sit in stillness, hoping for God, universal deity, stillness to speak, the voice of the silence to speak, in how we can craft and art our day so that peace and wisdom and joy pervade and make their way into our life and the world around us. And so we have to have some kind of private audience with the stillness and the world word or the Christos or Christ or God within us, the virtue within us, the virtue that has a stillness that can hold our highest dream and how it can manifest in every little way through our day. Get it? So let's go back to astrology, because you can hear the thunder. I mean, the world, like the gods are throwing the dice again. And you can see that whoever's president, all the leaders and all the people, this is a tough time. President Biden, he has good aspects, but he also has some tough ones, where, like in earlier September, progressed moon opposes midheaven. So that's trying to lay a base and a foundation and trying to keep his center and his inner self and his home together. And then September 20th and October 31st, Saturn opposes his Pluto. And that's like a need to hang on to structure and what works for the long run, in spite of whatever problems are going on outside of oneself. And you get a little more gusto and bravado September 22nd and November 14th with Jupiter semi-square. Jupiter transit semi-square is natal Mars. When I talk about Mr. Biden's chart, President Biden's chart, I'm talking about the transits or progressions against the natal. September 23rd, Neptune trine Mercury can make one feel like things are going good, or at least that you have a vision for how they could, a feeling for how they could, a cooperative working with certain others on how it could. And October 10th, Neptune conjunct progressed moon. Again, these influences are very big, and they influence months around and weeks around and days around, but exactly October 10th, transiting Neptune conjunct progressed moon, 4th house. So on one hand, you have to be very careful who you trust, and you have to be very careful of loose words and loose cannons sinking ships or stars. But the Neptune conjunct the moon can be like a mystical, spiritual, Abraham Lincoln and Washington had spiritual experiences in the White House, and other presidents have talked about it. Manly Hall talks about it a little bit, the spiritual side of politics in the White House. But it's a tricky aspect where you have to be careful of being rational and logical while you're being inspired in new ways. And you hear and feel bigger spiritual somethings that can influence you. A bird comes and talks to you, an angel, or even God. I think the difficulty is in late in October's full moon and October 16th, 17th, difficulties then for the world and the president in the United States, and with storms or weather or natural man-made difficulties, people add to the problem. November 9th, when, the end of October, you'll feel it, but in early November, transiting Uranus opposing the president's Mars. And this is like, having to learn to act in a new way. It's very important to be courageous for the truth and to step up to some higher love, truth, compassion, and be brave to act. But it's a very difficult aspect for when people act hastily or speak out of turn or say things they didn't mean. I mean, it can be a very, very difficult aspect. And that's why, I'm wondering about these difficult times that come up even into December solstice and December 25th, when there's more difficult aspects going into even January 7th. So this is a whole critical, important year. And you would think that it's going to be a difficult election, even though it's an off year a little bit. It's going to be a difficult election for the Democrats. And it could be more positive for what we call Republicans. And that we really seriously need to have Republicans and Democrats work together for the benefit of all. And no one, including myself, knows how to do that. And so that's why I had been pouring myself into spiritual talks that you don't have to come and buy a bunch of books, although it's great if you do have your own library, because it's hard to trust books on the internet sometimes. I'm sure you heard that. And then it's hard to trust others and it's hard to trust oneself. And that's why meditation, 3 to 5 minutes a day, in slowing everything up, listening with our heart. As you know, I've kind of created this idea that Spirit told me that the third eye is in the head. We know about that. But the third ear, the single ear, is in the heart. And that we really, truly need to listen with our hearts to the whole of our life and to the nothing happening right now, so that we can reattune the spirit of the world and the spirit of our higher self with our everyday life, that our soul can come to know this intimate relationship of the whole with every particular moment. And so I'm wondering, with these difficult aspects of the United States and the top people, a lot of people in top positions, you really start to wonder what the heck is happening. And and I think that a lot of what we see are the labor pains of the higher self of each of us individually and collectively coming out. That we're trying to get to a higher place where we can see what's for the good of all. The good, true, and beautiful. The good actions, the good thinking, the good feelings. What's true for ourselves and others. What's true in the long run as well as today. And what helps make us beautiful when our inner qualities come out into our everyday life. That's real beauty. So when we look at the new and full moons, let me grab them. We're looking at, let me get my calendar. We're looking at the end of September. Oh, I saw another aspect. I marked in my calendar where Neptune retrograde squaring the Mars in the United States chart. And that can be some real miscuing, where people lie or cheat or they misdirect or they fire a weapon in the wrong direction, or there's storms, or the danger of getting into conflicts and wars or violence. They're just totally unnecessary. On the other hand, it can be angelic messages. It can be like Mother Mary or UFOs. I mean, I don't know if I believe in any of that, unless it enters into our actions to make it better and improves the situation. Who cares? It's like a TV left on your inner soul or mind. But there are a lot of difficult aspects as we get into October, and we look at the new and full moons. Let me get to there. September. We had the September. We had the new moon in on September 6th, and there's some pretty good aspects. So we keep moving forward. No matter what's going on, everybody's moving forward. And we go to the full moon, September 20th, which is kind of close to Neptune. Some people see that connected to the Neptune's delusion or ideals. It's at the very end of Pisces, so the end of the mutable signs of Pisces and Virgo and Gemini. Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sag. If you're near the end, you're having some kind of peak experience. I mean, that's one way to look at it. It's kind of an idealistic kind of thing, isn't it? And then we move into more practical, Mars trine Saturn on the 25th of September. That's kind of practical and grounded and long term. And then we have Venus trine Neptune on 29th of September. Sun trine Saturn, Venus square Jupiter on 30th. See, that's like love, and things are kind of beautiful and grounded, and somehow things are working. And then as we get into October with Mercury square Pluto, we have Mercury in Libra, and it goes retrograde as we go into later. And so it goes retrograde. And so Libra in September and October visits like 20 Libra and 26. And it goes retrograde back to 18 or whatever. So Mercury's hanging out. So other people are trying to teach us something, whether we're getting it or not. Everything that's going on around us is trying to show us that if we need to work in new ways. And if we can't, because the other people are shocking us with whatever they're doing or whatever, we need to keep working on ourselves until we can figure out a way to balance. Libra's balance. Find balance and harmony with self and others, higher self and what we might call lower self. And we go into October and we have Mercury square Pluto, where on the 1st, and that's like we start to get that some things are not working and there's in-wrangling and conflict. On the new moon at 13 Libra, the new moon at 13 Libra, October 6th, squares the United States sun. And it's like there's a difficult aspect there too with the Mars and the United States Saturn. And so that's where there's difficulties, whether it's storms or money or wrangling and dirty politics. Pluto goes direct, and it's telling us what's wrong with the world that day. So that's a critical day when Pluto goes direct around the new moon. And we're going to be feeling that possibly as early as October 1st. And again, when we're looking at Pluto, we're looking at, again, you got to look at what signs and where your planets are, because we're looking at late Capricorn and Cancer and late Libra and late Aries are struggling with what is security and what can be long-lasting and what's going to make me happy and what can I sacrifice now to learn some better way later. And some people are too hard on themselves and other people are too hard on others. And when we get into these conflicts, we want to start more working on ourselves and finding peace within ourselves, so that we can bring, if you don't have love and peace, you can't share love and peace. And then on October 9th, the Sun conjuncts Mercury, and that is beautiful in a sense of getting some honest recognition of what to do and what not to do. And there we have Mercury conjunct Mars too. We have to be careful of overthinking, over-talking, but a lot of clarity could come in the news then that's more together rather than blaming and shaming others. I think on the new moon, we have this idea of shame. There is no shame or blame other than that we're not living up to our higher self. And we really live in not the new age, but the scapegoat age. And the age of criticism, we tend to try to blame others for why we're not happy, when from the point of view of the higher self, our higher self has put us in a perfect position to get enlightened, but we're not getting it. And can we, we're in a situation where we can't leave certain situations, and we can't fully accept the situation. While I'm telling you this, it's raining, a real beautiful rain, but it's real steady. You can hear the thunder, and the sun is coming out from the west, and the east has dark purple clouds, and the attempt of a rainbow trying to come out that's half out and half not, at least when I looked. And so that describes this situation. So that describes the situation and the difficulties of Uranus Square Pluto and all these aspects. And when you look at the depositors in October, which is, like Venus in Scorpios, ruled by Pluto, Pluto's in Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, Saturn's in Aquarius, ruled by Uranus and Saturn. You go to Uranus, it's in Taurus, and it's ruled by Venus. Go to Venus, it's in Scorpio, or Sagittarius, it's in Scorpio at the beginning. But then it's in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. You go to Jupiter, and it's in Aquarius, where you go to Saturn and Uranus. And so we're back to that Saturn-Uranus struggle. With Mars in Libra, it goes to Venus in the earlier part of October and September. The Venus in Scorpio goes to Pluto. Pluto goes in Capricorn, goes to Saturn. So you try to find where everything gets deposited. And Neptune's in its own little world, like some people are in their own little world and they're just avoiding everything. And they're just trying to keep everything going. And they're pretending the world isn't as insane as it is, and that the oceans and air aren't having a lot of problem, water and air and pure food and all that, and displacement of people's geography and place, as well as a displacement of self, sense of self and thinking. And all the more is it time for religion and philosophy and spirituality, metaphysics to step up to where some kind of higher angel can invoke our best virtues and wisdom. Okay, beautiful blue jay just flew up right then. Our best wisdom. Maybe the blue jays have it. So we're looking at the new and full moons. Let's go back to that. And we're looking at the new moon. We're looking at the new moon. Where am I? Hang on, I got my calendar again. Oh, and mind you, Mercury goes retrograde on the 27th. The 27th of September. And it is retrograde around 25 Libra to 10 Libra on October. And it goes right in, let me see, I'm looking for it here. We're looking at the full moon in September 20th, but when we go to October, we're looking to the full moon on the 20th. Yeah, The full moon on 20th of October, Mercury goes direct on the 18th. So that Mercury retrograde in Libra, okay, do you go back over things again to figure out what really happened in the last few months or year? Especially Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, Aries will have to rethink what's going on with others and self. And so we might see a renegotiation or something in a lot of places, or a rethinking. And Jupiter goes direct too. Jupiter goes direct, and it's going to go back into Pisces later. So it goes direct on that same day, on the 18th of October. There's a lot of wild changes when you get to the full moon that is at 27 Aries squaring Pluto. One has to wonder if there's some kind of like major thing that goes on with the world that affects us all, for better and worse. This is that kind of thing where there's major man-made or natural catastrophes or whatever. Hopefully none of that's going to happen. And it's actually an inner awakening of compassion. Pluto is that selfless compassion necessary. And you wonder that stock markets might have a really tough time at some point, which I'm not delineating exactly when exactly now, but you would think that with some of the Neptune aspects we're under now, some things are a little delusional with how extreme people are getting. And then when the Mercury goes retrograde and we go into October, when we have like the new moon, October 6th, squaring the United States sun, no matter what chart you have, and Pluto going direct, that there's a certain kind of aggressiveness that you would think that the stocks would have really heavy duty rise up then, or is it a heavy duty like up and down thing going on? But at some point here, you wonder if there's going to be some kind of correction, they call it, where it takes a pretty heavy dive. And with Saturn aspects, people try to control everything so that nothing is a surprise. But the Uranus is always kind of surprising, and you have to wonder what's going to happen, perhaps with a roller coaster ride with the stock market around the new moon of October, around the 6th of October, and then possibly around the 15th of October, and especially when Jupiter goes direct and Mercury goes direct around the 17th and 18th. Is that a difficult time for the stock market, especially around October 17th, 18th? And then the full moon when it squares Pluto. And Mars squares Pluto October 22nd. So these Pluto aspects affect the latter part of cardinal signs, and yet, and so does that full moon. And so that is a tough grind and a very necessary, when you have Mars square Pluto, I think in the United States chart around 26. I mean, the end of October is pretty tough for weather and criticism and negativity, all the way to October 30th, Sun square Saturn, is trying to get a hold on it. Things are out of control and you can't tell what is true and what's not true when you run into Neptune, such as October 26th with Venus square Neptune. And then you have, in November, you have the new moon at 12 Scorpio, kind of like conjunct the Pluto perihelion in 1989. And there's these tensions between Middle Europe and Russia and the United States, and when Neptune's involved, usually it's China. And so on the new moon of November, you have the sun opposing Uranus and the moon opposing Uranus. And that's where I'm wondering, new inventions or is like, do we reach beyond ourselves in outer space, inner space, underwater? I mean, a really big shift in money or the markets, where people want to have a more fuller understanding of how we can protect the grids and electricity. This whole September, October is a reevaluation of what is like a knowledge that will help us grow, and how to not go through changes without really changing. And so, when you have Uranus around the new moon, I mean, that, especially November 4th, I mean, that is like notorious for storms and quakes and sudden nature eruptions and crashes and shocks and sudden ups and sudden downs and roller coaster rides with life and what's going on. And you get to Mercury square Saturn and Mars square Saturn and Mercury conjunct Mars all on the 10th of November. And that is getting control over what went out of control in possibly September, but October for sure, and this new moon of November 4th is kind of getting control and wanting security, even if it costs. And then Mercury, I mean, when you have the new moon too on November 4th, that's like a lot of revelations in truth rather than just apocalypse. And Mercury opposing Uranus is the attempt of finding truth too when it gets to October 13th, rather than more dreams. And let's go back to sleep on the Sun trine Neptune on November 12th. I'm in November now. November 13th is this attempt for truth. And yeah, so then we go to the full moon of November, which is a lunar eclipse. And it's at 27 Taurus. And this is wanting things to be settled back down with some kind of honest assertion of what's going on, practical approach. And Mars opposed Uranus on the 17th of November, where this trying to blame other people and fighting all the time and arguing. And this whole thing with guns keeps coming up with a lot of these aspects in September, October, of how do we get smart guns or wise guns that don't shoot the wrong people? And how do we not just be angry and upset that, part of the Saturn Uranus is like attachment is the worst non-virtue. Anger is the worst non-virtue. Actually, the Buddhist approach is that anger is the worst non-virtue because it destroys your good karma and you go mad and become like an animal. And anger is like a definite statement that you don't know how to fix or educate anything, and so you're just forcing yourself that other people see it, and that's not cool. And so that's not loving your enemies. It's not educating the poor. It's not educating the poor of courage and the poor of imagination and educating the poor of spirit and the poor of heart and compassion. We're not educating the poor who are filthy rich. They're poor in spirit and soul and wisdom. We're not educating the poor who are poor in lots of things so that they can't see any way out other than shooting them their way out. And so this is kind of a problem. And forcing change. And people are looking for security around this full moon in November after all that we've been through the week before and the months before. And so then we get to December and we get the new moon at 12 Sag, and we're looking for higher-minded, something more all-embracive and something bigger in view that will hold us all. And that carries through to the December 8th Mars square Jupiter. And so it really is, a lot of people need to buy early, by the way, especially by December, as you go into early December. It really is important to get your gifts if that's what you do. And giving the gift of yourself is the greatest gift. And so then we go into Mercury sextile Jupiter on the 11th of December with Venus conjunct Pluto. So that's not taking things personally and trying to be gracious with wisdom and superior knowing, compassion and patience. And jealousy can be a problem, jealousy and attachment. Attachment is the glue that keeps us stuck. Jealousy is a sign that you love somebody for who you want them to be, not who they are. And Venus-Pluto is trying to help the less fortunate and little ones. The full moon, 27 Gemini, and the 18th of December. It's quite a lot of communication and talk, and people feel like they're getting a grasp of what's going on in the world and how we can fix things. At least I think, temporarily. But when it comes to December 23rd, 24th, 25th, Venus conjunct Pluto again, got to be careful that things don't build up in that early part of December, December 11th, Venus conjunct Pluto, and they build up and they get explosive. 24th and 25th should be more compassionate sharing, or keeping to yourself wisdom that comes only through happiness, that comes only through being alone with yourself, or alone with sacred, holy others. And the Mercury conjunct Venus on the 29th of December, along with the Mercury conjunct Pluto on the 30th, gives strong indication of who you love and who loves you, and what's going to carry you through to the new year. And I hope my calendar didn't block recording this. Okay, so you get the idea of these new and full moons. The new moon in Virgo, September, gives a sense of what is right work and good work, and what heals the soul as well as the body. You know, the new moon in October, 13th in Libra, a positive way of relating to others no matter what happens. The new moon, December, is Sag, looking for higher-minded spiritual love and truth. The full moon, December 18th, Gemini, linking up with new friends and ideas and old friends for wisdom and connectivity, feeling connected. That sacred time of the year, because December, you know, of course, is the sun goes closer. The sun goes closer to the earth. The earth, in its circle around the sun, like an egg shape, goes closer to, the earth is closer to the sun. And so we're bathed around the summer solstice into January 6th. I'll give more on that later, but we're closer to the sun. And that whole way the whole way that we go into ourselves and express ourselves and share, winter solstice all the way to that first week of January, it wonderfully or terribly influences the whole year. It's the beginning of a new year from a radical, dark, light perspective. We could say it's the beginning of a new year in the fall, in the September equinox. The September equinox, which is around the full moon. The sun goes into Libra on the 22nd of September in the afternoon. And right before that, there's a full moon, which almost indicates that we're peaking out the whole last of the year. Because of the ancient Celts and the early Essenes, and even the Jews on a mystical level, that from the Chaldean, Babylonian, ancient Egypt, Hermetic level, the equinox of fall and the evening, it's like the evening of the year, and the evening is the beginning of the new day. And you could say the full moon that comes after that is really an important thing to wind up and get the hang of everything that happened this last year and complete it before we begin a new year. And the new moon in October 6 is really new impulses trying to come in that we can see better in September 20th full moon. And October is really wait a minute, that was November. October, yeah. October is like new moon on the 6th and full moon on the 19th of October. And then you have that whole Halloween thing at the end of October on the 31st, that whole Halloween thing, and which should be fairly cool because Mercury's trining Jupiter on the 1st of November. So, the whole Halloween thing is death and rebirth. I'll talk about that some other time, about life after death and the planetary journey of the soul that frees itself from desire and fear, and the earth and the moon, and the soul expands through Venus and Mercury and the sun, and we go into spiritual worlds all through the planets and the starry realms before we reincarnate. Now, whether we're doing it literally, or we're doing it symbolically, or we're doing it every time we meditate or go to sleep, is a really good question to ask yourself. But Halloween is this wonderful example of the end of the year, the end of the lifetime. And you die, and you go to the cemetery, and the witch is there. The whole idea of Halloween is that we're celebrating a nighttime activity that's out of the body and after death. And so after we die, and even when we dream, we go to sleep, our virtues and non-virtues exaggerate. And so Halloween, we see at Halloween this exaggerated virtues and non-virtues as monsters and saints and angels and heroes and all that kind of thing. And you look for the big pumpkin stomach. You look for the giant pregnant stomach. You look for the porch light where you can get tricked or treated, right? So you go to the porch light and you say, trick or treat. And it's really the disembodied soul looking for the mom and dad to come to the door. And either the disembodied spiritual soul is tricked away into the spirit worlds where the body looks dead, but you're running around these exaggerated faces and virtues and non-virtues out of the body at night, the nighttime, the spirit world. Or you're enticed in for the treat, and then the idea of the pumpkin is with the light on, the candles on inside, is the pregnant stomach with the baby is inside the stomach, and the little spark of light of the reincarnated ego is in there. And then it's All Saints' Day or All Souls' Day. The Celts love that idea of November 1st as All Souls' Day, that you die, get born again, and every soul will reincarnate until they become enlightened. And that was the real meaning behind Halloween and All Souls' Day, is that every soul is going to make it. Many people don't see that, and I think that the reason Halloween is celebrated sometimes more than any other festival of the year, or at least just as much as any festival of the year, is this whole idea of our spiritual self is contained within this body, and when we get enlightened, or when we die and go into spiritual worlds, we kind of see how we did. We get totaled, and we hit the total button, and we hit pay dirt, and we die, and then we resurrect. We rise from the dead, the Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or we're the dead until we ascend, make an ascension raise our consciousness into the higher self. So I think I did enough for this wonderful excursion. And we talked a little bit about the new and full moons, and there's always more, but I wanted to spark you and inspire you to see for yourself how to be an astrologer and astrology is a way of keeping time and trying to learn. I want you all to learn astrology, Ben Franklin was a great astrologer who had Farmer's Almanac. He had that almanac that predicted major events, even death of a New York Times reporter who mocked him for his astrology. And the guy said, you could predict my death, and he actually did in the New York Times, and then they had to put it in that he did it. But he predicted weather and political events and speculated with esoteric. He had a bookstore, a New Age bookstore, and the Masons sometimes were called back then. I think all esoteric circles, whether they're Masons or Rosicrucians or Templars or Christianity or the Jewish mysticism, the Hebraic, the Chaldean Babylonian, the Egyptian, the Hermetic, the Neoplatonic, the Zoroastrian, the Persian, the Mazdean, the ancient India, the Greek, Roman, they all had the Roman Empire. I mean, that once you were a citizen, you had these rights. We borrowed from that in America. And that the golden ego, this noble, every religion and philosophy has this noble moment, and then they blow it somehow and become decadent. And the destruction of the Roman Empire, is that what we're going through now, the decadence of that? I don't know. I think that it hasn't been decided yet. A whole lot of things haven't been decided yet, and it depends on you and me to have 3 to 5 minutes a day in radical stillness. It depends on you and me to try to really, compost the negativities in our garden of silence and friendships and spiritual learning. To have, it's really important to reach out and get the heart of learning of every great religion, philosophy, and science. When you look at the Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky and Isis Unveiled, she talks a lot about a spiritual science. She talks about the 7 earth incarnations. And Rudolf Steiner and Blavatsky talk about, as we go into the age of Aquarius, how volcanoes and storms and earthquakes and destructive tendencies take place because we haven't learned to metamorphosize the present into the future with love and truth, the truth that holds us all, the love that blesses us all, the compassion that sees the least among us is something important to write and converse with. Okay, so bless your heart. This is Robert of Mayflower Bookshop. I do readings for personal charts, but I also, lately, I can see how if you do an astrology reading just to get your desires and avoid your fears and continue being who you are, astrology is a very living dynamic that changes, and astrology is changing all the rules now. I think that was the idea behind me attempting to write Astrological Aspects of the Art, was to start a new conversation about what astrology is. So astrology and the lords of karma and the planetary regions of the archangels and Dhyani koans weren't just gophers, that God isn't just, God's workers, like everything's part of God's plan, everything, and that pollution is misplaced energy and misplaced, virtues that become stuck somewhere. And so that is the deal with Uranus Saturn, is what is stuck and what is a revelation of the only self we have that will last into the future. Everybody says love, love, love. It's like their mantra, I love you, or I hate you, is some people's mantra. But how can we change ourselves so that we can change the world around us? How can we sit so deeply with our own heart that love can dawn again and shine again and unwind and flower our highest dreams and ideals to share with the whole world, to make the whole world a little happier? So with that, I bid you adieu. This is Robert of MayflowerBookshop.com. Bless your heart and your mind and your soul, and may the Spirit move you to grow in new ways.